Right.
And, being able to use, technology, and it's already in our students. Like, they know how to do all of this stuff. You see 3-year-olds using iPhones. Like, it's ever present already. So we might as well lean into the things that our students are familiar with and use that to lead them to what we want them to do.
Welcome to the Choir Baton, a podcast designed to engage with people in stories, ideas, and inspirations stemming from choir. No other art form, no sport, no hobby, no business requires a group of people to execute a communal goal with just their voices. Join me, your host, Beth Philemon, as I interview guests who are singers, teacher conductors, instrumentalists, and community members. Together, we'll ask questions, seek understanding, and share insight from our experiences in life and in choir. Hi, Choir Baton. I am so excited for this episode today with Miss Katie Wonderly. I have been following Katie for at least a year now on Instagram and have really enjoyed watching this brand that she is growing, not just grow in numbers with people online, but grow in the amazing ways that she is using social media to advocate for excellent musicianship. What's exciting about this episode as well, though, is Katie talks about not only using her platform as a means for advocating music, but advocating for social justice as well. And it is very clear on our hearts right now that we are a nation. If you are listening to this in the United States, I know we have many worldwide listeners as well, but if you're listening to this in the United States, we are in a nation that is hurting. And we're in a world that's hurting, but particularly in the United States because of years of systemic oppression. And I struggle with knowing what to say, how to say it, when to say it, what to say it. But I also believe that not saying anything is also saying something. So to my Black choir friends, family, strangers, I love you. I see you. Your lives matter. Your music matters. I think we can do a better job of musicians of even advocating that connection as well. And to particularly my white friends, family, strangers that are listening on here, I challenge us to remember that in times where we don't want to speak up or say anything, that is saying something. I say this to myself as well. And that even saying Black Lives Matter, even saying I love you, I see you, your life matters, that's, I think, the biggest, most important thing to say. So I challenge us all to be inspired by this episode, because Katie is really showing us how we can show up on social media as musicians, as educators, and using that to advocate the importance of that within our community. But Katie also talks about this, and it's also incredibly timely for me to talk about. We can also use these platforms to advocate for social justice as well. And your way of advocating doesn't have to look exactly like the other person's way of advocating, but advocating can be as simple as saying Black Lives Matter and then taking actions to learn more, to do better, to have these conversations, to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, as a phrase that's commonly used in a variety of different settings, but I think is very applicable here. Please enjoy this episode with Katie. It is a delight being able to talk to her. It's funny, at the end of this, I said we covered, I had this laundry list of all these things that I wanted to ask her about, and I thought there's no way we're going to be able to cover everything in here. And I think miraculously we did. So I I just am so excited for you to get this insight into her. There are so many applications and nuggets of things that you can take back to grow and learn, whether it's using your platform online and through social media to advocate for music, or it is just in conversations or really leaning into your authenticity. I think sometimes when we have conversations with people that are well known within certain fields, like, Katie is clearly, I love to claim her this Instagram music education celebrity, but we can think, oh, we need to be that, or we need to do that. And the only person that we need to be is ourselves. And Katie has leaned into her authentic self. You'll hear her talk about this throughout the podcast. Katie has really leaned into her authentic self, and I challenge myself to really lean into who we are authentically, because that's what the world truly, truly needs. So without further ado, my episode with the wonderful Katie Wonderly. Well, Choir Baton listeners, welcome to this super special episode with one of my new virtual friends, Katie Wonderly. Welcome, Katie.
Hey.
And so if you are not following Miss Wonderly Makes Music on every platform, you are living under a rock, because everyone is, and we've been talking about this for months, and life has been crazy. I am just so excited to finally dig in and learn a little bit more about you, Katie. So thanks for joining us again.
Absolutely. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So the fun, the overarching thing, right? Katie just finished her 4th year teaching in Oklahoma, where she teaches, it's K-5 through 5th grade?
Pre-K through 5th, yeah.
Oh, okay, bless you, I have questions. She graduated with her bachelor's in vocal music ed from Oklahoma City University. She has done 2 summers of master's works in Codi Ped from University of Oklahoma, member of American Codi's Educators, NAFME, National Education Association, and I have chills saying this because I felt like I lived through it vicariously. In March, she was named the 2020 Putnam City District Teacher of the Year. And I feel like am I missing something big that happened this year?
I think that was it.
Other than that, I mean, yeah, District Teacher of the Year. That's what it was. I was like, District Putnam City is same thing. But I mean, still, again, I love that you showed the behind the scenes of when you were winning the award and everything. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive in first and let's talk a little bit about Miss Wonderly Makes Music. You haven't been showing up on Instagram first, but for super long, right?
I started it this summer before my 1st year of teaching.
Okay.
And so it was one of those things that I knew going into it that music teachers will feel very isolated within their building. And so I was just looking for a way to connect with not just music teachers, but educators in general. And then I also knew that my friends and family were going to get really tired of me posting about all of my teacher stuff all the time. So I decided that maybe it needed its own space because I was just getting real excited about everything that was happening.
I feel that so much. If you scroll back to when I first got Instagram in 2010, I think, which, oh my God, that was 10 years ago. My first pictures are in my classroom for that so I totally identify with that. That's awesome. And then, so from that though, have you always, I feel like this really digging in though, has just snowballed within the last couple years. Is that fair?
Yes, definitely. It's kind of been crazy the way that it's all kind of taken shape because it's, kind of developed into its own brand, for lack of a better word, which was never my intention, was to have this brand. But all of a sudden, as you start developing things and figuring out the things that you like to post and the things that people are vibing off of, all of a sudden, it just kind of became this regular thing. And there were definitely key points throughout there that kind of catapulted that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's vulnerable at first starting sharing out, isn't it?
Definitely. It's one of those things, and especially, within my first couple of years, I had severe imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. I just had this idea that I wasn't a good enough teacher in those first years. I knew how to make things look pretty And so in my mind that everyone liked it because it looked pretty. And I didn't feel like there was any like concrete things behind it. And there totally was, like looking back, like, but we were all, new teachers. And so as a new teacher, I felt very insecure about the things. And so I only posted at first the pretty stuff and the stuff that I thought looked good to everybody else, but then very quickly realized that we're all figuring things out, whether you're a first year teacher or a 10th year teacher. There's so much that is not perfect about teaching. And so I really kind of made it my goal to share more of those imperfect moments, those moments when I was struggling, and found a whole bunch of people giving feedback about this, saying, you're not alone. That happened to me too. So yeah.
I love hearing you say that because and I'm just going to circle back to it, right? Like the temptation to only post the pretty and to not feel like there's substance behind it, but then realize like, okay, yes, there is substance behind it. But then also realizing too, some people post, and I'm not hating on other people by any means, but like sometimes people do post stuff that looks real pretty, that there's not substance behind that. And then how do you balance that in this space?
Totally. I mean, I will admit, I'm a fan of the pretty. My classroom is Pinterest perfect for a reason. It gives me a whole bunch of joy, but I'm not a good teacher because my classroom looks pretty. And that was one of the things that I had to, really settle into, is that being pretty was for me. Yes, it's for my students. I wanted them to find the joyful space, but I also wanted my space that I was going to be in more than anywhere else to be something that made me happy. And so all of the pretty was really for me. But then I had to figure out, how do you go beyond the pretty to really reach your students, because they're not there for the pretty.
Well, case in point, and I agree, I can't fathom that there's not something in your classroom that's not pretty and not Pinterest perfect. But I think a great example of you balancing like that quest to figure out the balance is when you recently taking down your classroom and you were taking down your calendar and you were like, this is from January, or it was January or February. And you were like, yes. Even if we hadn't been in COVID, it would have been like this. I was like, yes.
Yes, everybody is, that's the big thing right now is when they're packing up their classroom, they're saying like, oh, the date still says March. And it's really sad. It's supposed to be like, all the time stopped in March. And then I went in to unpack my calendar and it still had the January dates on it because, some things are more important. And my kids would remind me every day and be like, oh yeah, I'll fix that later. And then you don't, because life gets busy.
Right. Oh my God. I identify on that so much. When I packed up my last classroom, I was like, oh yeah, I haven't changed this bulletin board in 3 years. So
I had another one that it said noteworthy students. And I had this whole big idea for what I was going to do with it this year. And I posted my classroom and someone said, what did you do with that noteworthy students board? And I said, honestly, nothing. That board was empty the entire year. And I had ideas like I wanted to recognize students and I wanted it to be positive reinforcement. And it just literally never happened. It was empty the entire year.
You are my people. I wish we were sitting down with like coffees or margaritas like in person right now. Yes, I feel so, yes. Okay, so then question. I love that you said the pretty is for you, but that requires that you also then know who you are, right? And like what finds you joy. And that's really hard to do in general, no matter what age you're at, but especially when you're as young as you are as well, and starting a new career, figuring out who is Katie, who is Miss Wonderly, how do we exist as like teacher and person? How have you come to lean into that?
I think it really started like right out of college. As I went into student teaching, I moved into my house for the first time. And all of a sudden I wanted my house to be, it was the first time I ever got to like really decorate something besides like, I would decorate my dorm room for different things, but so it really started at my house. So the first year at my house when I was student teaching and then went on to be a substitute for a semester because I graduated in the fall. Yeah. I poured a lot of that. Like I've always had that need for creativity. Like that has been a huge part of me. And so at first, kind of settled into my house, and my house had to be Pinterest perfect, if you will, and all these things rolling in. And then it just easily translated into my new space, which was my classroom. And so having, seeing things that are organized, seeing things that are color coded and pretty, like just really brings me a whole lot of joy. And that easily translates into a classroom.
Well, and it's so natural to you too, I think, right? Like,
yes,
you don't really even have to, some people have that gift and other people like myself don't. like I remember when I first started seeing like how is like every shade of all of those colors uniform too and perfectly proportioned, and like I couldn't even figure it out looking at the pictures, much less. But I think what a testament to the fact that we all have our own natural gifts, and you were able to lean into that in this way.
Oh, definitely. That's the thing is I've always like creativity is something that needs to be a part of my life. And so for others, they talk about their classroom space and they exist with blank walls, and that's fine for them. And that actually makes them more comfortable. And so you've got to be comfortable in your space, or else how are you going to teach your students in a comfortable, exciting way? So for me, I get my joy and excitement from lots of colors and lots of things. And for some, that's just not their thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, so pre-student teaching, Katie, I know that you wanted to be a Broadway star.
Yes.
Who is your favorite Broadway star that you channeled growing up?
It was definitely Kristen Chenoweth. So she was my Oklahoma girl. I grew up in Tulsa, and she grew up in Broken Arrow, which is right down the street, if you will. And I, very early on just decided that was my destiny, was to be on stage. And which, I think it also translates very well to teaching, is because we're kind of on a stage every day. And so even though I realized, as I got older, that acting was not my thing. I couldn't pretend to be somebody else. I love to sing. I love to make music, but acting and pretending to be other people made me really uncomfortable. Yeah. It was not something that I was able to really channel. I went to several summer camps or weekly activities, and the day I knew they were going to do monologues would like find some reason that I was sick. Like the monologue thing was not for me, but I love to sing. And so, as I got older, when I went to go audition, I think I auditioned for the music program because I thought that I had to be a performer first before I could be a teacher. No one had really, told me about, the music education program in general. I thought that I, needed to perform first and then could go back and be a teacher. Mm-hmm. But realized, looking back on everything, that the things that I enjoyed most were working with little kids. Like all of my, our church had a youth intern program where you could volunteer for things. And I was always with the children's choir. When I have an All About Me page when I was in when I was 5, that said my favorite activity was playing with little kids. Like it was one of those things that as much as I thought that I was destined for Broadway, it was pretty clear that all of the other things were lining up for music teaching for sure.
Well, and we look at Broadway stars and the stories that they weave for us as signs of inspiration. And I think you are that Instagram Broadway star for others in how you just engage people and tell them stories. But yet you don't have to be someone else. You get to be yourself every day.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that. So what was your experience like in college with a music ed program? Did you go in, I know you kind of wound your way to music ed. Did you intend then to be early elementary or were you flexible?
I definitely knew that elementary was the place. Like once I had gotten, I think it was pretty early on in my senior year of high school that I had auditioned for the program and I didn't make it. And I was like, oh, now I have to do education. I think from that moment when I decided that it was going to be education, that it was very like reassuring. Like I knew that that's where I wanted to be. I knew elementary music was what I wanted to do. Frankly, I was pretty scared of high schoolers and middle schoolers. I just knew that the big kids were not for me. And so very early on, I, started really diving into elementary, and it worked out really well because our vocal music program had a partnership with a local school specifically for homeless children. Called Positive Tomorrows. And so every Friday I got to go and teach a kindergarten music class to these students who didn't have a music class in place.
Wow. I've never heard of this program before. Like, how did it start?
So it's a local elementary school, and they have been around for, I don't know, for a little while. And I know now that they just recently this past year moved into a large building, a brand new building, and they have now a permanent music and arts teacher. But at a time they were in what they called like a hallway, and their building was very small. They had, combined grade levels. So kindergarten and first, they were only serving about 50 or 60 students total at the time because that's all their space could handle. And so they didn't have arts for their students, but they wanted to make sure that they still have that opportunity. So they partnered with a lot of local businesses. They brought in people to do Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, and they had, different activities. They had someone come in and teach PE classes, but because of the partnership with my university, we were able to go in and be their music teachers.
Wow. How cool. Well, so this is a question that I also just want to steal ideas from you for. I am the worst elementary music educator in the fact of like, I'm not good with all like the fun little activities and like the things that you thrive off of that like I can see your eyes light up about, or like not my natural giftings. And so if there is a student like myself that like I will never forget when I was student teaching in elementary school, student teaching at an elementary school, not in elementary school. And my cooperating teacher just watched a kindergarten class like literally run circles around me. It was just, it's just hard. What tips do you have for students that are in their student teaching or in something like that, for resources or even thinking through that? What tips do you have for them?
I think that there's a couple of things. I think my biggest thing was seeking education beyond my Bachelor of Music program. Like there's only so much that you can learn in that time in your one elementary, like for me, I had one elementary methods class, that was it. And so there was only so much I could learn in those 6 months or a year. And then all of a sudden I was moving on to something else. And so I came into teaching feeling very unprepared. My student teaching was wonderful. I had some very amazing teachers that helped me out, but I knew that that wasn't going to be enough for me. And so there are lots of, methodologies that you can go into. The first one that I went to was Kodai, just because it was down the street.
Right.
We don't have any ORF programs currently offered in Oklahoma. And so for me, Kodai was easy because I could just go to the university 30 minutes away. And that was game changing for me. Just having, being able to spend 2 weeks focusing directly into that methodology and that way of teaching. And Kodai really just spoke to me and the style that I really kind of vibed with in the first place. Yeah. But I think if you're not like for elementary teachers, if it's, you can't take methods this summer because they're not being offered. Right. I think some things definitely to do is thinking of your students is, for me, I initially started off teaching one concept in one lesson. Like I thought if I'm going to teach dynamics, I have to teach it in this 55 minutes. And I didn't know how to sequence that learning. And part of that did come from my Kodai training, but in general, just realizing that, kids learn best in those smaller chunks. You can't teach a whole lesson on one thing and focus on it for 55 minutes. Their little brains cannot handle that.
Right.
And so being able to take one idea and splitting it up over, several lessons, you're, introducing it in this lesson, you're really focusing it on here, you're practicing it some more in the next, and thinking of it, your lesson in smaller chunks. And that was something that I didn't really figure out, like I said, until my second or third year of teaching, because I didn't know any better. I thought that I had to, teach each concept. I didn't know how to connect them all together. And which really helped with student retention anyway. They're focused, but then they're also retention of the material.
Yeah, I love that. So another facet, if you don't know about this with Katie's teaching too, is the fact that she has also done these awesome Facebook Live music classes that like I know have exploded probably even more than you expected at first.
Yeah, I actually just on Friday got a message from South Australia. I guess Australia was not out for the rest of the semester. They were out for a couple of weeks and then went back to teaching. Mm-hmm. I got a picture of a classroom of students looking at their screen, and Miss Wonderly is on their screen in Australia.
That's amazing.
It totally blew my mind. It was crazy.
I love that. Oh, I just love that. What are some ways that you have found similarities and differences in planning your in-person classes compared to your famous Facebook Live ones?
I realized very quickly that I wasn't going to get back the student response that we all very much thrive on. And I think there was like a blooper from one, because I started off recording them live and then realized that because of the stress of internet signal and Wi-Fi, that doing it all live was just, I couldn't rely on everything to do that. So I would pre-record it and then still stream it live. So it very much felt like we were there together in that moment. But if technology went wrong, I could just quickly re-upload it and we were good to go. But I realized very quickly that I didn't get that student feedback in the moment. I didn't know whether they were retaining it. I didn't know how many times I needed to repeat something. And so I just kind of had to find a happy medium. Like I, at one point, was demonstrating something and I just very naturally said, "Good job." And nobody was doing it. It was just me. And so just like little quirks like that of teaching that are very like naturally, like the way I teach and the words that I say don't always apply anymore, because now we have students experiencing it from a screen. And so having to kind of figure out the best way to do something and not sounding repetitive, but also still you need to repeat it so they can catch on. And I think for us, it feels more repetitive than it is to the students. And so in the moment when they're singing back to you, it doesn't feel like a big deal for you to sing the same song 4 or 5 times. But when you're by yourself in your living room, you're like, is it time now? Is this enough?
I love that. Okay, this is a selfish question that I'm curious about with the whole recording things too, is how do you work through like having to record yourself and then watch yourself back? Because I know that's something I struggle with, and I know we've seen so many music teachers struggle with that through this transition as well.
Definitely. I am very much a perfectionist. It is very hard for me. Things that I have control of to fix, it's hard for me not to fix them. And so which is part of the reason why I went live at first, because I knew that no matter what, like I just had to keep going and I couldn't start over. And so that was better at first to have the first couple of lessons be live, because I had to figure out how to stumble over my words in the moment and readjust. And that's something we do in our classroom. We stumble over our words all the time and our students are used to that. But somehow when you're recording it, all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, I didn't say that right. Let me fix it. Stop, restart. And I mean, there are some lessons that I think I probably had 20 takes. And I would have like 5 or 6 clips that I pieced together, but 20 takes total. And it just was nuts because I couldn't, my brain could not allow myself to keep going when I knew I could stop and start over again. Mm-hmm. And so eventually I had to just become really comfortable. And I will say I never got totally comfortable with it. Every time I still definitely had 5 or 6 takes, but I learned to be more comfortable with walking through some of those stumbling and saying, oh, we mess up, keep going. And so I've had to feel like I went back and forth. Like some weeks I was really good about just like 1 or 2 takes. Okay, here we go, keep going. And then others, it took a little bit longer.
What an amazing lesson of how we continue to learn as teachers, though, through this process. And there is so much good in showing our mistakes, but then not wanting it to be like iteration after iteration of it, right? That finding that.
I think for me, it was like, I have no problem making mistakes in front of my students because you feel like they're not judgmental, or you can laugh it off with them. But all of a sudden, not only was I in front of my students, I was in front of their parents and other music teachers and other people in the community. And it was all of that pressure, I think, that really was the thing that stressed me out. Like I don't mind stumbling over words in front of students, but when your admin is in the building or when your teachers are in, where their parents are in there, all of a sudden there's all of that added pressure for perfect.
I mean, that is a perfect, like even segue even, and we don't have to take a huge deep dive into this, but with even the little framework in which I exist on social media, I have experienced criticism and negativity. And I have no doubt that you have, particularly on a larger scale that you do. And that's it's hard for me whenever I deal with it, and I know that has to be hard for you too.
Yeah, there's been, a few things here and there, and you kind of have to balance how you're going to handle it. Like there are people that you don't know personally that it's really easy to just say block, delete, like you don't have to respond to that. If they're coming into your space, and you can choose whether or not you want to communicate with them. But there are others that are less easy to do that. I have a Teachers Pay Teachers store, and which I was really good about posting in for a couple of years. And then I created something that I felt very much that it was my own idea. I had come up with it all on my own. And another teacher had very kindly said, hey, I I think this might be mine. I think, and it was, they had made a blog post with something similar, which I had never read, had never seen. Um, but it was one of those things that it's hard to know, like, it's hard to take that because all of a sudden you feel like you failed. You feel like, what's the point in doing this? And so, but those kind of things, they're in your community. They're a music educator. We're colleagues. And so you have to have that conversation. And we were able to talk through it. And she was very kind and, was realizing that it, okay, this one was your idea. You could keep it up there. Like there was no hard feelings in the end. But it was something that was very stressful to deal with in the moment because you just don't know what's going to happen, but you want to maintain those professional relationships. So I think it very much depends on who the person is. I created the rhythm filters and the melodic filters, the sight reading, Instagram filters. And I had a kid who from who knows where messaged me because now they've reached beyond just music teachers. And they're like, why are you singing that wrong? And I went, what? And I looked on it. And what it was is that I was singing the solfege correctly, but I wasn't singing it in perfect pitch. And so in their mind, they don't, I guess, maybe don't sing it in solfege or they sing in fixto, whatever it is, the reasoning is. It was just a misunderstanding. And so I was able to go back in and very kindly say, hey, da-da-da-da-da-da, let me explain. And they went, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. And so some people, when they come at you, they come at a point of not understanding, but it can come off very rude or very just direct. And so I try to always come back at it with kindness, whether they are coming at me with kindness or not. That was always been my mentality of just coming from a point of kindness first. And if we can't figure it out from there, then see you later.
I love that. I have a professor that says assume positive intent. And I definitely, there have been a couple times where I've started to not and then reframe with that. You bring up this thing of your teachers pay teachers thing, and we're beginning to kind of see some of that, or some people question it, and we share so much within this community as well. Do you have any specific thoughts or tips for someone that's new, that's wanting to put their stuff out there, but thoughts on where is that line, right, of your original idea or not original idea or changing of it or anything like that?
I will say that that is something that I don't know that I've quite figured out yet. And it is hard for me to find that balance, which I think is a lot of why I have veered away from teachers pay teachers, is because I really struggle with knowing what's mine to share and what's not. Because we all, there are so many things that are, folk songs that are, open for use, but if you're presenting it in a certain way, does that belong to the person who taught it to you? If you're using these, icons that you learned from somebody else, is it theirs? Was it, and there's that fine line, and I haven't quite figured it out yet. And so it's easy to use it, use it in your classroom, share it on social media, but as soon as you start to profit from it, that's where the lines get a little bit iffy and people get a little bit concerned about you profiting off of something that they feel like was theirs in the first place. And so I'm still very much trying to figure that out, which I think is why I've taken a step back from teachers pay teachers until I can really figure out what's mine. What is it? What are the things that I'm creating that are my original, which why a lot of it is decor. Because for my teachers pay teachers store has a ton of decor in it because that is mine. I did make it. But I've really struggled with the curriculum side because so much of what we do has come from these trainings that we've had. So is it ours in the first place?
Right. But then it's this fine line, right? Well, who's the quarter note belong to, right? Yeah. And where do we draw that line, and where, I hesitated truly for years about putting stuff out there because I never wanted it to look like I was copying anyone. And some of it's similar, but some of it's different. But then my other thinking is well, I know what I'm putting out there is good in quality. And if someone else might not, I'm not hating on other people, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if not me, then whom? And I want to contribute positively. So I'm right there with you, and I haven't all figured it out sort of thing yet. I think that's where I lean into choir baton teaching membership and even stuff. I always try to be this is how I teach this. These are videos of me watching this. So you get ideas and inspiration because, unfortunately there are people out there that do not care.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Well, okay, so then I want to lean into a little bit more of what you were sharing with the decor and with the filters, and I mean, you were really just leaning into so much of this technology aspect and stuff too. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're doing and maybe where your dreams are taking you with that.
So I, just as creativity has always been a very huge part, technology definitely has. My dad is a computer programmer. So although I never learned all of the ins and outs of coding and all of that, it is very naturally a part of who I am. And my dad was always that person that always had the latest thing, which means that I always had the second latest, right? So he would get the next iPhone and I would get the second generation of the iPhone, and he would get the next thing and then I would get the hand-me-down. And so we were always kind of, up to date with all of that. And it started off very much in high school when my sister and I would create like videos for like the end of the year band banquet and things like that. And so I've always had a joy of using technology and figuring out the cool newest way to do things. I think has always been kind of a part of me. And so it was, when I first got into teaching, was figuring out how to use Photoshop for the first time. Like I knew how to piece like clip art together on PowerPoint, but how do I create it myself? Like, how do I make it mine that's not somebody else's? And so, figuring out how to use Photoshop. And then it became, using iMovie, but then even beyond that, which is Final Cut, which is the fancier level of it. And so just always kind of exploring what's next. And I've always had an interest in like the latest trends. And so the first thing was all the gift stickers. And so I knew that, well, if everyone else had these gift stickers, surely like once I saw people that weren't, influencers, didn't have 1 million followers that were making them, I thought, I can do that. And so then you just do a little research and you figure it out. And so I started with the gift stickers, and then people started using filters, and I went, that can't be, let me tell you, it's a little difficult. I still don't quite understand how I did it, but I got on YouTube and followed somebody step by step by step by step. And once you have that like template in place, then it's real easy to just plug in the pictures. But I've always just had a joy and an interest in kind of figuring out the latest thing, I think.
I love that. Well, and you hit on an important thing that I think people need to remember on multitudes of levels. They need to remember as consumers, and they need to remember as people that are potentially starting out in this space, because I firmly believe like we are just at the beginnings of music educators really leaning into social media and online and selling courses and blah, 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 blah. But is that this does not happen overnight. Like you have learned through the school of Google and YouTube, and it takes so much time.
Definitely. And I will say that I came into this time at a point of privilege. Like I came into these last 2 months of teaching from home already having a wealth of technical knowledge underneath my belt. And so I was that person for a lot of my staff at my school, and even on social media that was, doing walkthroughs, helping people out, because I was already there. So it wasn't, a lot of people are really struggling in this time, and that's okay, because they're figuring it out for the very first time. Right. But I, came in at this place of privilege already having figured a lot of it out, that I was able to not only help the people around me, but then take it to the next level, because I had the extra time to kind of figure out the next steps.
Yeah. And I would agree. I'm not like displacing privilege, and I get that, and especially in how we were raised and all too, but also like hard work too. Yeah. You'd really leaned into this space of learning Photoshop and learning all those things as well too, which I think is huge. How do you see technology continuing to influence this space of education, and especially music education?
I think that we've realized more than ever, whether if there's a whole up in the air of what in the world is going to happen in August, nobody knows. Right. But I think no matter whether we're in the classroom or at home, technology is going to keep being a part, and even a larger part. I've heard people talking about, we're going to have, we can't necessarily play instruments all together or switch them out, or, have music that's being handed from student to student. And so really relying on these Chromebooks and these iPads to house all of their information. Right. And, being able to use, technology, and it's already in our students. Like they know how to do all of this stuff. You see 3-year-olds using iPhones. Like it's ever present already. So we might as well lean into the things that our students are familiar with and use that to lead them to what we want them to do. So like that's part of the reason where the filters came from. It's funny how they've really been used more for higher level musicians and teachers, but my initial intent was for students because they are the ones on their Instagrams and their TikToks using these face filters. But why not, use that as a point of education? And so while they're figuring out which Disney princess they are and, which Avengers superhero they are, they can also read some rhythms and practice their music education. And so I think because our students' technology is so much a part of their lives, like we have to meet them in that place. And we have to, even if it's uncomfortable for us, we have to figure out what it takes to get there and put in that extra work because that's how we're going to best reach them, whether we're in the classroom or not.
Right. I love that. I would love that so much. And I'm sure, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of your kids probably have social media, but especially they're using it through their kids. But those of us with students that live and breathe their social media a bit more than like third, fourth, fifth graders, heaven forbid, kindergarten, pre-K, first and second graders, even find like the communication that we're getting from students on these forms of social media is much bigger than, a Blackboard site or an email or something like that.
Totally. When we first got, the notification that we were going to be gone for 2 weeks in Oklahoma, the first week that it all kind of went crazy was our spring break. So we knew that we were gone for that first week. And then they, in the middle of that spring break, said, we're going to extend spring break by 2 weeks. So there was not going to be any instruction. We were just going to take those next 2 weeks to kind of figure it out. But there was nothing in place and schools hadn't started having those conversations. But I already within like 3 days was like, I have to do something. And I didn't know how to communicate with my students. The only communication system I had in place as a music teacher was with my choir students, which was like 50 kids, but I have 650 kids at my school. And so really relied on my social media to do that because I knew that a lot of their parents had started following me through my Facebook and my Instagram because I had made it very public. And so I knew that was going to be my first way of reaching them. And so that's really where these live music classes started. It's crazy that they've reached way beyond my own students and my own country for that matter. But that was where I wanted to start, was like, I just needed a way to reach my students and to show them that I was there, that we were still going to make music, that it was still going to happen during this time. And so social media became that communication platform because we didn't have anything in place at the time.
Right. I love that. And I think, what a great example that you've set for so many teachers. And we continue to see it as like the teachergram is a thing, but so many times there's been like, you can't communicate with teachers on Facebook or Instagram or social media, or like finally once they figured out, on Twitter someone can follow and you don't have to follow, little things like that. And I could talk about arguing why we have to and being a proponent of that even more, but I think like what you're doing and how you're showing up in that space is the best way to teach someone is through example. And you are not only setting that example that you can teach music digitally, but you're showing other music teachers, other administrators, school community people that like social media can teach us, right? It's not a bad thing.
Yes, that is for sure. And it did, like my social media very much started off as teacher to teacher. And it wasn't until really, I feel like this last year that a lot of my platforms, specifically Facebook, really started reaching beyond teachers. And it was all of a sudden this whole community was involved. When I posted my Black History Month hallway display on Facebook, it went viral like crazy. And so all of a sudden I had all of these just community members that were following my page. And so it became so much more than just teaching teachers. It was, a way of reaching this larger community of people and showing them what music education could be and what music education was. And I had never really thought of myself in that way as, advocating for music education through these platforms. Like I naturally did that, but that was never really in my mind that that's what I was doing. But all of a sudden, now I had all of these people who weren't music teachers on my page trying to figure out what was going on.
Let's talk about that post because it's so beautiful. And I also am so glad to know that your janitorial custodial staff took it down with care.
Yeah.
I cannot fathom the trepidation about that. But if someone is listening and they do not know about that, would you share with us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I really started, within my first year of teaching, realized that my Black History Month was a huge part of my school's culture as a school that has 60%, really 65 to 70% African-American students. Black history was already a part of the culture of our school before I got there. They did a big program every year. They had these things. And so my immediate thing was, how do I apply this to music? How do I get this there? And I've done different things over the years, but this past year, my big hallway display was a whole afro of records. And the records weren't just any records, they were records of specifically Black musicians. And I have to shout out to my mom because it was totally all her idea. I had done a similar one the year before without records, and she kind of had this idea and spent literally the entire year collecting these records for me, helping me get them. Some of them were her own records. And so in the very beginning of February, I took all of them and, command stripped them on the wall with a face. And so now students were able to walk by, and I added little cards to it so they could not only see who those artists were, but where they were born, what specifically kind of artists were they, what did they do. And so it became this really big, not just display, but educational piece for them. And I happened to record myself doing it. And that's really kind of what started going viral, was the step-by-step, when people started realizing, oh, like it looks really grand, and it was, but it was not as difficult to put together as you might see from the outside. And so being able for people to see that step-by-step process, I think was really exciting to them.
We fail to remember how much we love watching the process in things as musicians and music educators. And that's the perfect example of how, process over product. I love that. And how powerful for you as a white teacher, for your students of color to see you being such an ally for them.
So I have spent a lot of time this year reflecting throughout the Teacher of the Year process. And so I've had to spend a lot of time, writing my thoughts down, which is not something I do very often. But one of the things that I said is, like, how can I expect my students of color, Hispanic, African-American, Asian, all of these things, to find an interest in music if the only people that we're talking about are dead white guys in powdered wigs? Like, if those are the only musicians we talk about, if they can't see themselves in what I'm teaching, how can I expect them to be invested in what I'm doing? And so from the very beginning, especially trying to build relationships with my students, because I teach in a very high poverty area. And I came in with fifth graders who kind of gave me that stank look on their face, like, we don't care that you're here. We don't want you to be here. And we're like, it doesn't matter who I was, what I was going to do. They were ready to, because there was no trust there.
Right.
And so as I was building their trust and forming those relationships, it was really about finding things that interested them and things that they were familiar with or could relate to, and then using that to teach music in that way.
Right. I think it's something that I really underestimated for many different reasons. But anytime you go into a new school community and it's a school community you didn't grow up in or have very little experience in, that in and of itself is going to create cognitive dissonance. But then especially when you have the skin color of a privileged person in a setting like that, it's even harder to understand that, particularly if you haven't thought about it.
Absolutely.
Well, I also appreciate it because I have struggled at how to show up and how to be an ally without trying to be, speaking bluntly, because that's what I do, like one of these people that seems like I'm just jumping on a bandwagon, or like because it's like the thing to do, or, oh, she's just another white woman wanting to like check a box by celebrating Black History Month because that exists. It was just powerful to see that showcase of allyship through that sim.
Yes. And I think that it's, we go big for Black history because it is a part of our culture, but we very much celebrate all of the others as well, right? It's not just about making sure that this one group, just because they're the largest group in your school, is represented, and it's not just about celebrating them in February either. I think it's really easy for us to look at February and say, okay, here's the month that we do it. But if you're just doing it in 1 month, that's not the point. You have to make sure that your students are represented the entire year. And it's important to stretch them beyond their own boundaries too, but they have to feel represented, and they have to feel seen in your classroom.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You mentioned the writing and reflecting that you've had to do as Teacher of the Year. I think this is like a little known understanding that, like, when you are awarded Teacher of the Year, it does not end. That's when all of the work truly begins.
Yes.
I guarantee so many listeners have no idea or understanding of what this truly means. Will you enlighten us as to what now you've had to do as Teacher of the Year?
Sure. And I'm sure that it varies from district to district, but in mine specifically, we had 20 something teachers of the year from all the schools in our district. And so we had to fill out an application, and that application included 6 full-page essays where we had to talk about our philosophy of teaching, like all of these things that you write in college. What was something new that knowledge that you gained? What is your platform going to be as teacher of the year? What are the what are you going to advocate for on the state level? What are the things, like all of these things? And it's, you think, oh, I just, like, for me as a 4th year teacher, I thought, oh, I just wrote these 4 years ago. Like, I already have a philosophy of education. And then you read that philosophy you wrote as an inexperienced senior in college, and you went, oh my gosh. So I very much, and I've never been one that I feel like is comfortable with formal words. Like I love Instagram because it's real easy, quick captions, and I love that, like, informal writing, but formal writing has never been my forte. And so it really just, it was a lot. And I had really pretty much spent all of my Christmas break. Like, I checked out of social media for a little bit, spent a lot of time at coffee shops, just diving into why I wanted to be a teacher, why I was teaching, the things that I've learned, the things that I want to, push forward. And honestly, having that time, I recommend, whether you're a teacher of the year or not, to really take some time to really reflect, because I noticed and it's kind of crazy to think, like, a lot of big things that happened this year happened between, I feel like, January and now, which is that direct time right after I had just spent all that time reflecting on who I was and why I was doing it. So I had that platform for myself to stand on. And I think it has been a huge burst of confidence, not just because it had the Teacher of the Year title attached to it, but because I knew why I was doing what I was doing. And so taking that time to really reflect and to write it all down on paper and edit through it and, sort it all out, was really life-changing for me, being able to kind of truly reflect on those things.
I love that. What are some of the things that changed?
I think that I just felt more comfortable speaking out about what I was doing, like, and being who I was. So I like doing things like a podcast, doing things like, webinars are things that I didn't feel like I had a place to do. I didn't, as many followers as I have on Instagram, I still very much felt like I was this young and experienced teacher who didn't have anything new to say, or didn't have any, anything big to offer to the table, or maybe, hadn't been teaching long enough for it for her thoughts to be valid. And I think it's very easy, especially in the social media community, for us to feel that way. And so finally, taking the time to really, like, center my thoughts and really realize that the stuff that I have been doing is important. And there are people who maybe don't know about this certain way, or how to do things this, or haven't thought of it in that way. And that the things that I have to say matter. And we spend a lot of time, it's easy for me to say important things to my students, but I think when I, move to the level of talking to colleagues, I take 5 steps back, because I feel like it's not quite my place just yet. And so having taken that time to really, center myself and figure out why I'm doing what I'm doing has really helped in my confidence, for sure, just pushing forward and realizing that I have something to say and I have something to offer.
Heck yes. Heck yes. Oh, that's hard. And it's not always been well modeled to us. I think this is something new that our generation is really bringing to the table, and will continue to see more of brought to the table. And how then do we lean into that? And I mean, I don't know, I'm not trying to put words or stories or experiences in you mentioned that you grew up in the church, and I grew up in the church as well. And in the church too, it was like, you listen to the person with the experience and the age and that sort of thing, and that's who you lean into as to what to do. And our world is shifting from that, and I think in a good space. But for those of us that have caught in the middle of that, and then also realizing, well, yeah, we do have experience now, like, and balancing it I struggle with it as a female too. How then do I balance that? It's hard.
It is, very much. And I think that we just, I lost my train of thought totally right there. I had something and it's gone. It disappeared.
No, that's me all the time. No, but it is. And a good friend of mine Megan, we were talking about this the other day with kids, and that as we continue to advocate for our students to speak up and to have a mind of their own, and to like to understand, you know, like if someone touches, I mean, to be very specific, like if someone touches you, this is not right. If you see someone's calling someone this, speak up. This is not right. Blah, 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 blah. Like we are championing that behavior. But then as educators, so many of us have been trained and brought up and brought this like mindset, even without realizing it, that like when the teacher speaks, you listen. If you're not realizing that we're telling kids then two different messages, it's very confusing. And then we don't understand why they are responding to us. And that's where we have to teach them it's okay to respond now. How do you respond?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it's really reframing so much. And it's an exciting time, I think, to be in education and in music education, for the ways in which we can have a broader impact on our musical world around us.
Totally. I mean, you look at the way that, you know, I've seen several posts. It's like, what are the things people are doing right now when they're bored? Like, it's all arts. It's music. They're making the acapella songs, and they're drawing chalk on their fences, and they're doing, you know, they're turning to the arts during this times when everything else seems so crazy and unsure. And so I think that we really have to, you know, stand on that platform as music educators, that what we're doing is important. And that in order to be familiar, that you have to build it from that younger level. And, you know, I think as we move to the fall, you know, I've already seen the posts on the Facebook page of schools cutting their arts programs and things in that, and, you know, figuring out what the heck I'm going to do in the fall when I can't have 650 students rotating in and out of my room. But we have to advocate for our programs, because clearly they matter.
Right. Yes, advocate and innovate. And you are such a leader in that innovation, and how we can use filters and use Facebook Lives and do all of these different things to really show up in this space for others, which is, I'm so grateful.
Yes.
So I'm going to close out by asking a couple of random questions. I occasionally do this. And then I have one other question, but so random tips, like what do you love to do beyond creating the most beautiful Pinterest worthy classroom on Instagram?
I like in personal life.
Yeah. Like, yeah. Non-music.
See, and there it is. Let me think. This is hard, because my first thought was like, I like to play piano, but that's also music. So, yeah. Binge watching television, 100%. Yeah. Netflix, yes. Hulu. I like to, and it not always, I found that I can't stick with movies, I feel like, because it's too long, but I can watch a good TV show just back to back to back to back. Totally.
Yes. And because you can like do stuff too while you're doing an episode. Yeah. Oh, yes. What's your guiltiest pleasure binging?
Well, I just finished Bachelor and Listen to Your Heart, which was terrible, which is why I love it. I'm that person that the more terrible it is, the more I enjoy it, because it's just so bad.
I mean, we could do a whole, oh my gosh, I'm going to do a Choir Baton spinoff if they decide to do that show again. And it's going to be called Choir Directors. You know how like the whole Bachelor squad like recaps it? We are going to be music teachers recapping it.
Love it.
I'm not kidding. That would be amazing. Were you surprised at who won?
No, because they were kind of like playing them up the whole season like that. Like, I was wondering, no, I was not.
I wasn't either. They sounded great too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll save all of this for the podcast coming out in 2021. That is Choir Baton Responds to Listen to Your Heart. And it will be called Listen to Your Choir Teachers, stories coming from, yes. I love it. You're a big outside person. I feel like you seem to connect outside a lot.
Yes.
I love that.
So my big thing, for some reason, I don't know that I realized this about myself, but like in college, anytime that I felt like trapped in my dorm room, or there was just like so much craziness going on and I just like needed to get out of there, I would always go to the lake. And we have a lake that is like surrounded by all sorts of park and greenery and such. And so I would just like lay out my t-shirt blanket and just chill at the lake, and just if I needed a space to just like be for a little bit. And that has been a little bit harder recently, because I felt like I couldn't just like, I've been very careful about the way that I, go out into the community. And so, but I found that I can just sit in the back of my car. And so now the t-shirt blanket sits in the back of my car, and I back it up to the lake. And so I have a nice little view of everything. So I just know now I just spread my t-shirt blanket out in the back of my car, and I can just chill back there, have my little pillows, and it's just a nice breath of fresh air, literally, when everything, you just kind of feel, especially now, just so trapped. And you feel like you can't really go a lot of places without being, too careful.
Exactly. Well, how then do you have any like time management tips, or even like garnering your own interaction on social media to keep from finding inspiration, but also, I mean, it's your second job too, to work and exist on social media. How do you balance that?
That is something that I have really struggled with, I feel like. And I thought at the very beginning of all of this, when I knew I would have all this extra time, I was like, I have to structure this time. And so I had like created this schedule that was like hour by hour, like, okay, an hour of this, and then I'll move on and do an hour of that. And I very quickly realized that I structure myself better like day to day. And so like maybe today is the day that I, am going to work on getting my house put back together now that I brought everything home from school. And then maybe tomorrow will be the day that I work on this, webinar that I'm going to be presenting this next. And then maybe, because I found that I liked once I started a task, I have to finish it. Like my brain does not let me move on until that project is done. And so I cannot just like leave something be for a little bit and come back to it. Which has been hard for social media for sure, because when I post something, I'm the person that will post it and then we'll go back and check every 5 minutes to see what's going on, make sure there's nothing that was wrong. Did I spell something wrong? Did I do this? And so that has been difficult for me to balance, and to be able to just, take a step back and say, like, I have to let it go for a little bit. So I'm definitely still figuring that out for sure, but it's, being able to kind of give myself the grace to, deal with it for this time and then set it away for a while and then come back to it.
Yeah. If a new teacher or even experienced teacher is thinking about getting on social media, I can assume that you would say recommend it.
Yes.
What are 2 tools that you use that you would recommend anyone use? And it can be, I mean, there's so many, and I'm sure you use a ton, right? Mm-hmm. But let's think 2, because then people don't get overwhelmed maybe. What would you recommend?
So my biggest one first is a app called Mauve Stash, which is, and really to me doesn't make any sense for what it actually does, but it's called Mauve Stash. And what it does is it blurs out faces on videos. And so you can make it really complicated where you can like go frame by frame and like follow a face, or you can just take one giant strip and say, here's the little area where my students' faces are, and it blurs it all out. Because one of the big things, I send out a social media permission form to my choir students every year, because it's a smaller group of people. So anytime there's like an occasional face on my feed, it's always one of my choir students who I've gotten that permission from. But I really try very hard to protect my students' identities, because it's not their space and they don't need to have their faces on there. And I don't need people to see their faces to show what I'm trying to show them. Right. And so I use Mauve Stash a lot, especially during the school year, to kind of blur out those areas so I can still share videos without, showing students' faces.
I love that you said that. I actually had a discussion with someone one time that was railing on a teacher for posting pictures of her students' faces. And I said, you don't know if that teacher has permission of their kids, because on the flip side, sometimes that teacher posted, if that teacher has permission, right? Like same with me, I always had teacher permissions, or, like student teacher permissions anytime I shared stuff. And I have a lot of my kids' faces on it, but for what it was with my kids, like, they wanted to show, and I was able to show them how to exist as an adult and not like showing your honey or showing your and I mean, I love to get ratchet with the rest of them, but still like how to show up appropriately on social media. Ratchet is not the word I was looking for. What was the word I was looking for? It's savage. That's my savage dance.
Yes.
This is why I have not posted any videos of me dancing, because of that attempt to say, I'm singing the song now in my head. But show like that you need to have permission. And some kids like it. I also think too, some kids like their parents don't show pictures of them being proud on social media. And that is another way for you to be like, look at what John did, or, any kind of kid like that. But that is huge, especially in elementary music, when there's no way you could even keep track of that.
No, with 650 students, it's so difficult to do that. And so like if there's a video, like I had a teacher's kid that I didn't have previous permission for, but we were playing the glockenspiels for the first time. And this little kindergartner got so excited, and thank God it was a teacher's kid, because I could just walk down the hall and be like, look at your student. I was like, can I post this? And she was like more than happy to share him with the world, because it was just awesome. And so, but you have to have that permission first. And so that's, I think, things that people don't think about, but there are ways to cover faces and still share what you need to share. But you can also, I think I got my permission. I don't remember where. I think I found it on Teachers Pay Teachers, and I just bought it for $1 from somebody. And it was just an easy way just to have that written permission. And I've never had any issues with any parents that have, about the things that I'm posting or the things that their students are being shown in. But I had that permission in place ahead of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you're listening, make sure you have permission, use the app. Also, don't judge other people when you're seeing pictures of their kids out there, because you don't know.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I love that. And then what's your second recommendation?
I'm trying to think of the ones that I use the most. Probably an app called InShot, because InShot, you can take like a picture and then add a video to it. So when I look at my feed, I really put a big focus on what my entire feed looks like, because I feel like if someone clicks onto your profile, they're going to see those 9 photos first, and if they're not going to hit follow unless those first 9 photos look exciting and enticing. Yeah. And so and that's just me personally, so I put a lot of thought into the way that I present like the shot that they see when it appears on my profile. So when I share student videos, I always attach some picture at the beginning to be the like cover photo of it. And a lot of times if it's an activity, I'll put what the name of that song is, and you can add those text things on top of that using that app. And so that way when people see it, they go, oh, doggy, doggy, click on it, let's see it. And it's not just like a blurred out picture of students in your classroom, because that's not exciting. People don't click on it to see more.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. That's such a great organizational tool for you to even find your videos as you're going through them. Do you find I sometimes find myself referencing stuff on my feed from like a long time ago, because I'm like, I know where it exists there. I don't know where it is in my camera roll, but.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Well, Katie, thank you so much for speaking with me today, sharing so vulnerably with the Choir Baton community, and more than anything, just being such a source of inspiration and advocacy for music education.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So if people want to follow, they can follow you on Instagram, they can follow you on Facebook. They can, if they want to have a room like yours, they can pray and go follow your Amazons, your Amazon store. You're on TikTok. You are on YouTube. What am I missing?
I just recently started a website that has all of those links on it too. So MissWonderlyMakesMusic.com. And so on there is at the bottom, it should be all of those social links. But then I've also started on that site, which I haven't updated it this week, so I have to look at it again. But I started a calendar with any time that I find any of these online PDs that are happening, because there's just an overwhelming amount right now. And I can't even attend all of them, but I want to have a place to keep track of where they are. And so I started a PD calendar of all the ones that I find on that website as well.
I love that. I love that. Well, all of that will be linked here in show notes. And again, thank you so much, Katie. Did you not just love that episode? I mean, I need to listen to it and re-listen to it because there's so many great nuggets there that Katie talks about. Thank you so much, Katie, for being a guest on the Choir Baton podcast. You can find Katie, like we mentioned, on her website, social media, all the things. I would also love for you to make sure that you are connected into the Choir Baton community. We are growing as well, and it's just a really exciting time to be in this world of choralpreneurship, as I like to talk about it now. I'm actually, the next episode of the Choir Baton podcast is going to be talking about that. But you can be involved in Choir Baton in a multitude of ways by making sure that you subscribe to the Choir Baton podcast so that if you're listening on iTunes or all the other platforms, that you are notified when a new episode comes out. I also really, really, really value your recommendations and comments that you leave on that, giving us feedback and giving our guests feedback, letting them know in a public way how much you just enjoyed their time and message that they have delivered to us. I also want to support a couple other things that we have going on and share with you. We have a weekly Choir Baton letter that goes out. And by letter, I mean, if I could handwrite it and send it to the hundreds of you each week, I would, but I can't. So it's in an email, but that comes out on Sunday mornings. And then you also get a follow-up email later that evening that tells you about a Zoom call we have at 7:00 Eastern time. And generally, occasionally there's topics, and sometimes they're just hanging out and being in community with other choir teachers. And if you were if you're a music teacher, you can still join us. I promise we are not exclusive in that. And we have a lot of choir teachers that teach a variety of other subjects in there as well. So we would love to have you on those Sunday night Choir Baton calls. Additionally, we are building out the Choir Baton YouTube channel with all different kinds of videos on there to not only empower teachers, but we're also beginning to develop content that will empower students as well. We don't know what the fall will look like, but my hope is that the Choir Baton YouTube channel will also be a resource that you can send your students to have them engage with. And finally, there is the Choir Baton teaching membership. And this episode, we talked a lot about leaning into authenticity and leaning into your authentic self. And the Choir Baton teaching membership is designed for teachers if you are in a school, community, or church setting. And there are modules in there on how to teach rhythm, melody, harmony, but then also how to do that through written ways, and there's worksheets in there, different forms of assessment that are in there that truly are unlike anything else that's out there on the market, that help you understand and teach a lot of gaps that we miss when we are teaching new students and even experienced students as well in music literacy concepts. Additionally, I have other modules in there that are based on community building, some new instructional videos that I'm always trying out. They're kind of my guinea pig place to see what you think. And there are tips on there for finding a job, ways that you can interview, questions to ask. I have included my personal portfolio that I bring to job interviews when I was interviewing. So you can see examples of how I tied different assessments as well as different standards to a tangible product that I could show an administrator or interviewer. And additionally, I have a mini class that I release every single month. And this month of May, and I'm going to leave it up for the first week of June, is on digital communications for your choir. And then that's going away. And the new mini module that will be released on Monday, the day of this podcast, that is going to be on leaning into your authentic self as a teacher. I think that teaching online has caused our community to really re-examine who are we? What are we doing? What are my end goals? What do I want? I've spoken to many teachers that are energized by this, that are defeated by this, that are ready to get back into the classroom, that are ready to embrace some sort of hybrid learning, that are considering leaving the classroom. I mean, so many different things. And so this mini course is designed to help you really lean into Who are you, and how does that relate to your teaching of choral music? And how can you begin to think about weaving a path that really resonates and can bring you happiness and fulfillment, even though we don't know what the future is going to hold? You know, we can't control the future, but we can begin to proactively frame our lives how we want to live them. And that is what this mini course is going to be designed for. And then finally, I know this is a long outro. Thanks for sticking with me. I do want to also address the fact that our nation, if you're in the United States, is hurting. And again, say that we oftentimes don't know exactly how to show up or what to say and how to take action. And this is 110% not sponsored. He does not know that I am doing this. But one of the ways that I took action was inspired by a post Miss Wonderly made. And she posted a picture of herself on Instagram that was wearing a Lift Every Voice t-shirt. And I love that. I mean, I love the song, right? It's the National African American Anthem, and have always taught it, sung it, but again, like the words continue to resonate more with me the older that I get. Unfortunately, like the more of what is being filmed, right, as more of what's being filmed in this world around us, right? I think I've seen that. Probably many of you have seen the quote, right? Like, it's not that these things are newly happening. It's now just that they are being filmed happening. And I apologize, I can't remember who said that or who quoted that. This is not something that I'm saying first. I'm getting that quote from somewhere. But ways in which you can support. And I think too, one of the simplest ways to support is through also supporting a fellow educator, and then to also support a Black male educator, but then also to just support the community, support music, all the things. And that is Mr. Willis has, if you're following him on Instagram, I'm sure that you know this. And if you did not know, he has a store in which he sells merchandise that's all about empowering music educators. But he has a particular line of t-shirts. And in the winter, he had sweatshirts that have this Lift Every Voice beautifully stated on the shirt. And I think, and I saw this shirt from Miss Wonderly. She was wearing it and tagged him in it. And I love the shirt. I love the message. I love the opportunity. So Miss Wonderly posted a picture of herself wearing a Lift Every Voice shirt, and she tagged Mr. Willis in this post. And I quickly jumped over there, saw his page, and the fact that he has a whole brand of apparel that supports music educators. And there's so many great t-shirts that talk about it. Music education, like more than a music teacher, is his mantra. And one of the lines that he sells are Lift Every Voice t-shirts and sweatshirts. And I loved it. Bought one immediately, literally from my couch. That's how easy it is to do, right? Like, you just see it on Instagram, click, 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 bam, you're in, and it will be shipped to you. And bought one of his shirts, and I can't remember if it was like once I had already purchased it, I messaged him and I was like, dude, I love your shirts. I'm so excited to get mine, or maybe after I'd already had it. But anyways, Franklin and I started chatting via Instagram, and lo and behold, he is living in Nashville, and where he went to high school is where I did some of my practicum teaching. Like, we know very similar areas of the city. I mean, and then that high school also was a true stone's throw away from where I went to undergrad at. So it's just a small, small, small world. But I think if you are looking for additional ways in which you can show your support, what better way to advocate for Black lives, and also having the opportunity to educate someone about music, and in particular the National African American Anthem, and that being the Lift Every Voice song, then by going out and purchasing one of Franklin Willis's t-shirts on his website. And so his website is fwillismusic.com. And when you go to it, you just click on shop. I'm doing it right now to just make sure that you know that I'm telling you all the right ways to go. And you go to t-shirts, and he has all these really cool t-shirts out there that you can get. And I love the Lift Every Voice because I love that song. I like the style of the shirt, and I like the opportunity that you have to start a conversation with someone about music, but then also about the fact that Black lives matter, and we need to say that more, even when we don't know what to say or where to begin acting. I think that is even just a leaning in the right direction. So I encourage you to do that. Check out his site, check out his work, and it kind of comes full circle because, again, I found out about Franklin through Miss Wonderly, and she is wonderful. Thank you again, Katie, for being an episode on the Choir Baton podcast today, and I hope to connect with you in some way, whether it's through the next podcast episode on choralpreneurship, whether it's through a weekly email, you come to a Zoom call, you join the teaching membership, you check us out on YouTube, all the things. Thank you so much for helping me and ultimately the community support our mission of more people singing.